Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I hope the week's gone well. It's certainly been busy over here. Home thoughts: there is no story that is not true. So says Chinua Achebe. Things fall apart. Storytellers are a threat. They threaten all champions of control. They frighten usurpers of the right to freedom of the human spirit. In state, in church or mosque, in party congress, in the university of wherever. Again, Chinua Achebe, Anthills of the Savannah. Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. This is a photograph of a male lion we saw at the Fairmont Mara in August 2017. And this is a photograph of a male lion who'd crossed from Laikipia with his brothers into the Samburu area. We saw them in Samburu. There was a saying in Umofia that as a man danced, so the drums were beaten for him. Things fall apart again. On that note, this is a photograph of some drummers with groove I took at the Fairmont, Mount Kenya. I came across a series of photographs by Paolo Pellegrin which caught my attention. His photography was being featured in Magnum Photos. This photograph, civilians fleeing Basra during intense fighting between coalition forces in Saddam Fedayeen, Iraq, 2003. Another photograph, this is from Magnum Photos again. Influential evangelist Billy Graham has died, aged 99. Again, Magnum Photos. Extraordinary photograph. Somalia is perceived as the most corrupt country, while New Zealand is ranked as the least corrupt. Eastern Ghouta crisis: Russia considers ceasefire in Syria after UN plea. Russia said it will consider supporting the UN proposed ceasefire in Syria as long as it does not cover ISIS and Al-Qaeda linked groups. A 30-day nationwide ceasefire is possible as long as it does not cover ISIS, the Nusra Front and other groups who are shelling residential quarters of Damascus, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Thursday. The Russian modus operandi in these matters is to flatten it completely. See Grozny. And on that note, this is a photograph from November 1995, executions Prospect Pobedi in Grozny. Pretty arresting photograph as well. North Korea's Kim Yo-jong emerges from the shadows. Before she became the global face of North Korean diplomacy, Kim Jo-young was better known for avoiding the limelight. That changed in February when the North Korean dictator dispatched his sister, who's believed to be 30, to South Korea for the first visit by a member of the Kim dynasty to its southern neighbor. The trip was hailed as a charm offensive, with many international media outlets praising the smiling Miss Kim for softening the image of the notorious regime in Pyongyang. In reality, Miss Kim is an integral part of the dictatorship. Officially, she is the Deputy Director of the Propaganda and Agitation Department of the Workers' Party of Korea, a role that charges her with crafting and bolstering the image of her brother and the nation. Unofficially, she is a close advisor to Mr. Kim and is believed to be one of his most trusted confidants. Ms. Kim's importance to the Pyongyang regime was evident in Seoul last week when she met the South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Despite the presence of 90-year-old Kim Yong-nam, North Korea's ceremonial head of state, it was Miss Kim who led discussions, sitting directly opposite Mr. Moon. For Kim Jong-un, Kim Yo-jong is the most reliable person at this moment. More than anybody else in the delegation to the south, her advice is the most valuable and influential. And then saying, it is known that there are frequent conflicts due to her personality and her know-it-all attitude. She is known to be condescending, arrogant and foul-mouthed, he said. In some ways, Miss Kim's career echoes that of her aunt Kim Kyung-hoo. As a sister to Kim Jong-il, the elder Miss Kim also rose to prominence, eventually joining the Politburo in the position that Kim Yo-jong now occupies. However, her luck ran out in 2013 when Kim Jong-un had her husband Jang Song-taek executed for treason with anti-aircraft fire. Kim Jong-hoo has not been seen since. They were not the only members of the ruling family to meet an unpleasant end. A year ago, Kim Jong-nam, the estranged half-brother of Kim Yo-jong and Kim Jong-un, was assassinated with VX nerve agent while traveling to Malaysia. The killing was a brutal reminder to all, including Kim Yo-jong, not to challenge the supreme leader, Pyongyang. 12th of February, I wrote about how Kim Jong-un unleashed his secret weapon on the world, and that secret weapon being his sister, who evidently bamboozled South Korea's President Moon River. Asia Times is asking, after the Peace Olympics, is it time for the War Games? And asking why were the 2018 Winter Olympics so critical in political terms. They have offered a breathing space amid unprecedentedly high peninsular tensions, following a furious and very personal war of words between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and US President Trump. North Korea test-fired a ballistic missile in November 2017. It had the range to reach all of the United States. Analysts are divided over how close North Korea is to possessing a full nuclear deterrent. The Trump administration has made the North Korea crisis the centerpiece of its foreign policy. Then asking, what does South Korean President Moon want? Since taking power in May 2017, the liberal Moon has consistently held out for dialogue with North Korea. His wishes were answered in January when North Korea announced that it would come to the Games. What does North Korean leader Kim Jong-un want? Given the opacity surrounding North Korean governance, we cannot say for sure, but it is widely believed he wants the following: relief from global sanctions in the near term, the halting of the spring Allied military drills in the medium term, and to leverage Seoul away from Washington in the long term. Then asking, what does President Trump want? North Korean denuclearization. The question is how to achieve it. 18th of September, last year I wrote a piece, "A Screaming Comes Across the Sky," that was referencing Thomas Pynchon and the rocket. Just now, with Mr. Trump obsessively blaming the FBI and Democrats, it looks as if America does not believe democracy is worth fighting for. That's in The Economist. Justin Trudeau was visiting India. Take a look at this photograph. My piece last weekend was around the wind of change, and I was saying Africa is not a country, is a ubiquitous meme, and at its core is an absolute truth. The continent is non-linear. Kinshasa is not Addis Ababa, is not Lagos, is not Pretoria. I was saying, however, a wind of change is blowing through this continent. Paolo Pellegrin of Magnum Photos, anti-Mubarak demonstrations in Tahrir Square, Cairo, Egypt, 2011. Seems an eternity ago. Again, Paolo Pellegrin, Muammar Gaddafi in his residential compound, Tripoli, Libya, 2002. 24th October 2011, I wrote a piece, Gaddafi's body in a freezer, what's the message? And then this caught my attention, Lorenzo Meloni, Ouagadougou Center, Sirte, Libya, September 2016. Let's move on to the currency markets now. Euro dollar 123.05, dollar index 89.99, Japanese yen 106.85, Swiss franc 0.9359, the pound 139.53, the Australian dollar 0.7830, India rupee 64.855, South Korean won 1079.93, Brazilian real 325.03, Egyptian pound 17.6950, and the rand has been hovering around this level 1169.16, but I expect the rand to break higher. Dollar index, take a look at this chart from Adam Mancini, and he's kind of believing that it's going to top out in the near term, because he's talking of a resistance zone between 90 and 90.50. Japanese yen back below 107, last trading at 106.87. That's had a storming run, up 6% year to date, and most folks expect it to target the 103 area. 125 seems to be a psychological barrier for the euro at the moment. We're currently at 123.03, but take a look at this diagram. I think we're going to draw down. I think you sell 125.50, which I've said previously. Short positioning in Treasury futures has climbed to a record. This tweet from Kylie Jenner: so does anyone else not open Snapchat anymore, or is it just me? Ugh, this is so sad. And the Snapchat price reacted immediately. Gold, let's take a look at where that is, 13.29 trading there. So we've had a little bit of a rebound. WTI crude oil last trading at $62.60. That too has recovered from 2018 lows. Sub-Saharan Africa $14 billion order book shows investors still crave African bonds. When Kenya started a series of meetings with some of the world's biggest bond investors in the US and London last week, it was in the midst of a political crisis. On the day the roadshow started, Moody's downgraded the nation's credit, and then the IMF divulged that the government had lost access to an emergency $1.5 billion facility after missing fiscal targets. Never mind, investors placed $14 billion of orders when Kenya came to the market on Wednesday, allowing it to issue $2 billion, $1 billion of 10-year and $1 billion of 30-year securities at 7.25% and 8.25% respectively. Kenya continued Africa's blazing start to the year in the Eurobond market. Egypt and Nigeria each attracted $12 billion of orders when they sold $6.5 billion of debt between them last week. Saying there could be more to come from the continent, Ivory Coast is said to have chosen BNP Paribas, Citigroup, Deutsche Bank and Societe Generale to manage a sale of euro-denominated debt. On Tuesday, Ghana's finance minister said he may double his target for an upcoming deal to $2 billion, and South Africa said it had plans to raise as much as $3 billion in each of the next 3 fiscal years. African Eurobonds issued in 2018 thus far, 10-year tenors, Kenya 7.25%, Egypt 6.59%, Nigeria 6.5%. Switzerland imposes sanctions on allies of Kabila, 14 asset freezes and travel bans. The West is trying to turn up the temperature. He's meanwhile gone around to Lungu in Zambia, amongst others, to lobby, I'm not sure what for. As I said in my article over the weekend, President Kabila has finally acceded to entering the delivery room, but this is clearly a problematic delivery. Africa Confidential, writing about Ethiopia, the edifice cracks, they said. First a concession, then a crackdown. The ruling party's divisions over how to respond to growing revolt are on show. After the most tumultuous week in Ethiopian politics for years, which included the resignation of Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn, hardliners appear to be reasserting themselves in the accustomed manner. The critical step in that process came on 16 February as the Council of Ministers approved the imposition of another state of emergency to last an initial 6 months. The previous one, first declared in October 2016, was finally lifted last August. The latest authoritarian measure came after mass prisoner releases were followed by further violent unrest. A strike in Oromia that choked Addis Ababa and Haile Mariam's sudden move created the impression of a government about to topple. I said in October 2016 the government needs to change tack and effect a course correction, and history shows us that this course correction is one of the most difficult things to pull off. Human Rights Watch, does Ethiopia's new state of emergency dash hopes for reform? Makes an interesting point. Ethiopia's constitution requires that 2/3 of the members of the House of People's Representatives approve any state of emergency within 15 days. In the recent past, this would have been a rubber stamp vote, given that the legislative body has no opposition members. But the resurgence of the Oromo People's Democratic Organization, the Oromo Region Party within the ruling coalition, means a 2/3 majority is not a certainty, that there could be a fierce and polarizing debate on who will be the next Prime Minister. Resolution of both questions will send an important signal to whether the Ethiopian government will continue to rely on repression to stifle calls for change or embark on a meaningful process of reform. Rian Malan has an interesting piece in The Spectator after Zuma's fall and life on the Little Karoo, saying in recent years, living in South Africa has been a bit like having cancer. The malaise eating us from within was corruption, and there seemed to be no cure, which is why there was no dancing in the streets when our dreadful President Jacob Zuma was finally eased out of office on Valentine's Day. For me, it felt as if the entire nation was hobbling out of hospital after a long and painful stay, almost too weak to walk, but very surprised and grateful to discover that it had somehow survived. So I didn't dance in the streets, but I did spot a local ANC leader standing in the sun outside the general store. I hobbled over and shook his hand. "Comrade," I declared, "well done." We talked for a while about the way forward and for once found ourselves in agreement about almost everything. The new President Cyril Ramaphosa is a good chap. With any luck, he might just manage to muck out the giant pile of ordure left behind by his predecessor. Interesting article. He also concluded by saying this country has a miraculous knack for escaping from tight spots just in time. 19th of February, I concluded my article by saying we want to be long Ramaphosa. South African all-share down 2.27% this year. Dollar versus Rand, take a look at the chart. I still think we're heading towards 11. Bloomberg has an article, "The End of Water Comes First," to Cape Town. I said previously, I cannot help feeling we're like frogs in boiling water. We have created massive interference in the cosmic tuning phenomenon. Nigerian all shares up 10.5% year to date. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is up 29.02% year to date. Very interesting piece by Aidan Hartley in The Spectator. Oxfam's troubles began when it became politically correct. It should stick to providing clean water and food. In the early 1980s, when I was a schoolboy, my father, Brian Hartley, worked for Oxfam during a famine in Uganda's Karamoja. Like Dad, the other Oxfam people I remember in East Africa were earnest agriculturalists or engineers who'd been overseas most of their lives. Some of them were religious or socialist, but they all had the technical skills to help local farmers rebuild their lives after wars or droughts. The focus was on development. Like my dad, most were sandal-clad volunteers who worked for the charity for free. They helped farmers cultivate better crops or breed, improve livestock to stop soil erosion, vaccinate cattle, plant trees and dig boreholes. Around the turn of the century, during Tony Blair's government, everything suddenly changed. UK charities like Oxfam had failed to move on from the cycle of emergency to sustainable development. And yet the crises were getting bigger and nastier, and the do-gooders had never been in such demand. Budgets exploded, aid groups got so much money they could hardly keep up with the burn rate, which is what they call the need to spend funds before the end of a financial year so that donors do not cut the flow of future cash. During my visits to these offices, I've often wondered how often many of these aid workers ever visit what they call the field. They attend workshops, seminars, and even retreats, but they are not the old technicians in dusty sandals we once knew. Suddenly, Oxfam became like a large corporation with 19 global franchises. Last year, it raised $480 million in donations. This created its own momentum to raise yet more money. Fundraising by itself gobbled up £26 million of Oxfam annual revenue, and the media became a key tool for mobilizing more cash. Meanwhile, it was the gradual shift of emphasis from development work in the field towards advocacy and what Oxfam calls influencing. The year before last, Oxfam says it spent an incredible £67 million on a worldwide influencing network to support progressive movements at all levels. Very interesting article, Aidan Hartley, do take a read. Zambia's FinMin says to continue engaging the IMF on debt management. The point is they have no other options. This is a photograph, Cityscape by Glaxman. Thanks for sharing this great shot of Dar es Salaam. Seychelles is to swap some of its debt for groundbreaking marine protection. In an agreement described as the first of its kind, the Indian Ocean nation, popular with tourists, is designating nearly a third of its waters as protected areas, aiming to ensure the longevity of its unique biodiversity. Take a read of that. That's very interesting. We visited the Seychelles in October 2015. Do take a look at the photograph of Hannah on the beach. I was writing an article then from Mahe, one of 115 islands that make up the Seychelles archipelago. Has a population of 90,000, smallest population of any independent African state. Big on the blue economy. And of course they had to navigate the financial crisis of 2008 when their debt to GDP soared to 125%. Djibouti ends Dubai's DP World contract to run container terminal. That's an interesting development. LSE PLC tweeted delighted to welcome Kenyan Cabinet Secretary to the Treasury, Henry Rotich, to open London trading this morning to celebrate the Kenyan government's $2 billion bond listing. Kenya says it will implement reforms to extend IMF deal. That's the Financial Times. We don't need the IMF resources at the moment, but we need a precautionary or insurance arrangement, so we definitely like to continue with the same facilities, Henry Rotich. He said he would curb spending and boost revenue to reduce the budget deficit from 8.9% last June to 4% by June 2021, and come up with a package of reforms that will help us get us out of the current interest rate cap arrangement so we can extend credit to the private sector. Jan Nicholson, the IMF's Kenya representative, said the two reforms were key to extending the facility. Mr. Rotich said the bonds were 7 times oversubscribed, showing the credit story of Kenya remains positive. He added that about a quarter of the bonds would be used to pay off debt and the rest spent on development projects. Razia Khan said the need for fiscal consolidation is fully realized in the Finance Ministry. Whether this is taken on board by all actors in Kenya is a different matter. There will have to be a broader buy-in that this is the way to go. I said so far we've seen no willingness from the government to bring the deficit under control. He's got to slash a few things, and so far I haven't seen him wield a knife. In another article with Reuters, I was saying the government were able to weather the knocks of the Moody Moody's downgrade and the IMF issue. But I said people are worried about debt to GDP ratios and they want to see a stronger language about how this will be addressed. And I concluded by saying we have got to walk the talk. We're not even talking the talk yet. This is the statement by the Kenyan Treasury on the issuance of the Eurobond, and as I said, I reiterate, creating a yield curve out to 30 years is a positive step. It was a 7 times oversubscribed order book and a dollar yield curve now stretching out to 30 years. Kenya Power has reported first half earnings per share slid 30.233%. Revenue, half-year revenue was up 14.765%. Fuel costs surged 97.462% because of the usage of thermal energy. Total operating costs up 17.371%. Operating profit was down just 1.868%, but finance costs surged 42.788% to 3.257 billion, meaning profit before tax was down 19% and profit after tax was down 13.326%. Basic and diluted EPS was $1.50 versus $2.15, down 30.233%. Cash and cash equivalents as of 31st December deteriorated substantially to a negative cash position of 7.743 billion shillings. They attributed the decrease to the general slowdown of the economy and an increase in financing costs. Electricity sales grew by just 2.3%. Increased use of thermal generation as a result of poor hydrology. Thermal usage increased by 416 GWh or 47%. It's a very cheap share on a classic PE analysis, but it's certainly been in the eye of the storm of late. Interesting article about M-Pesa in The Guardian. Drunks love paying by M-Pesa, says the owner of a bar in a low-income area of Nairobi. It's easy to get conned when you have cash. As many as 8 out of 10 transactions are still cash, says Stephen Chege, Director of Corporate Affairs at Safaricom. We want to keep on reducing that ratio. In late 2016, Safaricom removed fees for transactions under 100 shillings with a view to driving uptake among the cost-conscious. The response was swift. Low-level transactions jumped from 1% of the total volume to nearly 11% by the end of 2017. We estimate that only about 10% of people's income is born digitally, so it's an extra step to move money into the digital environment. That's Tamara Cook, who works for FSD Kenya. But look at Zimbabwe. We were literally forced into a change of behavior. In June 2017, we were averaging 10 million transactions per month on our electronic platforms. By November, we had reached 18 million per month. But obviously, Zimbabwe was an extreme situation. Previously, only about 20% of transactions were being done electronically, and the remaining 80% was cash. But then, obviously, we saw this dramatic change. Safaricom sits up 10.28% year-to-date, has underpinned the index averages. Unga is up 38.79% year-to-date and is the subject of a takeover offer. Nairobi All Share up 5.58% year-to-date. DTB Kenya up 9.375% year-to-date. But look at this volume chart. There's been a lot of trading in DTB all of a sudden. Nation Media is down 11.2% year-to-date. Uchumi is down 30.43% year-to-date and released its first half earnings, which was analysed. Just click on the link. The NSE 20 is up 0.21% year-to-date. I wish you a tremendous week.